I'm going to very slowly begin our meeting one more time. It is 8:46 and we'll get back underway. All right. So the next item is action item 6.2. It is an action item, and it is regarding the school start times that has been in discussion, in investigation for well over a year. It's been on the mind of the board for many years, and I will open it up to a motion from a board member. Kathy.
I move that the board adopt modified option B as the plan for later school start times going forward.
Very good. I would take a second for that motion. Carolyn.
I'll second that motion.
Very good. Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up to discussion, and this would be an opportunity for other motions if need be.
I move that the board postpone the decision to vote on the later start option until our next meeting, December 11th.
Okay, so we have another motion on the table. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, Nate. And that, I will open it up to discussion on that motion regarding the postponement. Do you want to make some comments, Susan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to.
Promise to keep it short.
Yeah, no promises. I have to, I need to do, oops, hang on for a second, I can get a little closer to the microphone. A little disclaimer. Those of you who know me also know that on the board, I rarely take a lot of time with making long speeches. But since I have 7 years of not doing that, I'm hoping that you'll indulge me this evening because I do have some thoughts that I want to share with you. And I am going to read those thoughts because I felt it was better as I went through my thought process. I thought it best to just put it on paper, and that way I wouldn't ramble. So as I said, it may take it just a little bit, but please indulge me, and I will read you my comments. I've given this a tremendous amount of thought. It's the reason why I'm asking for an extension till December 11th, because I've thought a lot about it. So here's the deal. When I left our board meeting on November 13th, I felt like I was on a freight train careening out of control. There were gaps in the information I needed in order to make an informed decision. But at that point, I wasn't certain what I still needed to know. I just know that I felt uncomfortable with the idea of moving the vote to November 27th. Since then, I've spent a great deal of time reviewing the report and talking to a variety of people within our educational world, including several former school board members, and many who are not involved in education at all, and many of them whose voices have not been heard, sometimes because they feel it is safer to remain silent. I've come to the conclusion that I'm not ready to vote on later start tonight, and I'm requesting that we postpone the vote until the December 11th meeting when it was originally scheduled. I'm aware that this request comes as a disappointment to my colleagues on the board who are convinced that this is what's best for PSD, and to those in the community who share this view, but I'm asking for the opportunity for all of us to take a collected, deep breath and go beyond passion and a sense of mission and focus on some very real concerns. When I joined the board 7 years ago, our practice was to ask ourselves 3 important questions when we were deliberating an important issue. And some of you may remember those days. What is the issue or change? Who does it benefit? And at what cost? Later Start is a change of monumental proportions that will impact almost everyone in the Poudre School District and our community. Yet we have not examined it according to our tried and true measure. So let's take a look. What is the change being considered? The answer to that is simple: moving the entire Poudre School District to bell schedules that align with American Medical Association guidelines and providing the necessary transportation. Who will benefit from this change? High school students are the primary beneficiaries of this change. Some have added that middle schoolers, especially the older ones, can also benefit from additional sleep. And here's where I would ask my colleagues to pause to consider several things I've observed from the data and my personal discussions over the past several weeks. We've said that we're doing all of this for the high school and middle school students. Yet, have we heard a resounding vote of confidence from them for our efforts to change their lives? I read the survey comments and perceived a sense of, please leave our schedules alone, from the student viewpoint. Some said that if we absolutely have to make a change, they would choose option A, the one closest to their current schedule. And a couple of letters from students to the BOE strongly recommended that we stay with the current schedule due to myriad personal impacts, including sports, music, after-school jobs, and care of younger siblings. Others commented that they felt the opportunities for student input had been limited in scope. So, who will actually benefit from this change? And who else's voices have we not heard? I'm very concerned that we on the board are willing to approve a change of this magnitude with only 17% return on our surveys. I've been told repeatedly that this is an amazing response compared to other surveys we've administered. Really? That's less than 20% of all the stakeholders in our PSD community, and of that number, a little over 30% don't want any change, and the other 2/3, as the report said, want some kind of change. I quote from our press release of November 16th. It says, "The survey results did not present a clear mandate or strong preference for change, nor for the maintenance of the status quo. No clear mandate, yet we are going to take the 12% who responded to some kind of change and commit to a makeover of such heroic proportions." Throughout my experience in public education, I've dealt with change. It's part of my life. But at each school where I worked, the staff and administration agreed that the proposed change would not take place unless at least 75% of the stakeholders agreed to it. The late Gary Bamford, a gifted educational leader in PSD, set an even higher bar at 80% when he was principal at Preston. That was followed by a year of study and yet another year of planning before implementing the change. We never rushed, and the changes were successful. Yet members of our board are willing to launch into a change of monumental proportions with little more than 12% of the stakeholders who cannot even agree on which change they want. In the course of my conversations these past few weeks, I've often heard a comment that saddens me and perhaps explains why we have not heard from the silent majority. I've been told it doesn't really matter what I think or say. The board will do what it wants, and I'll have to live with it, or deal with it, or implement it. And it's abundantly clear that they have made up their minds about this one. Is this the impression we want to portray to our community? So let's look at the question, at what cost? The first one, the big question is the program sustainable? The board has provided the startup costs for the buses from our reserves, but what about next year and the years after that? It will become a line item that will require its own funding. Where will we find the money for the ongoing expenses, both anticipated and unexpected? And with the defeat of Amendment 73, there is no pot of money at the end of the rainbow. The second thing, we've talked about lights for our fields that are projected to cost several $1,000,000. Granted, it will be a multi-year project, but what will we do in the meantime? And when will we have time to talk to the community members in the neighborhoods we choose to light up? It's a well-known fact that we're having difficulty finding bus drivers for our current routes. Where will we find the bus drivers for the extra buses we will need for the extended routes? And how will an extended day impact our drivers who start early, have a break midday, and finish their routes in the afternoon? Will the extra long day impact their ability to find the part-time employment they often seek to supplement their income? There are so many unknowns, so many risks of unintended consequences. We will most likely incur costs that far exceed what we thought such a change would involve. Can we be sure we will not have to be drawing funding from other programs to fund unanticipated costs related to later start? Can we promise that the services that we have today will be the same services we can offer after implementation of late start? Sadly, we don't have helpful reports or studies from the other districts who have already launched into this change. Some of them are experiencing their first year, and others are starting their second. What we are able to obtain from these districts are anecdotal strands of data that are, at this early stage of the game, inconclusive. I would rather be the last district on the block to have the new swing set if it means that we approach implementation of this dramatic change with caution. It's our responsibility as stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. What will we do about the fact that students will be missing more classes in order to travel to or prepare for athletic events under the new schedule? And will it impact their seat time requirements? There's also the cost of manpower. Another thing I heard as I visited with folks was, it seems like we're involved in too many things. Can we take on one more major project and actually do it well? Or we never seem to finish something or fine-tune it before moving on to something new. So let's look at some of the big projects we're currently involved in. Post-workforce readiness, high-impact teams, futures labs, career cruising, data dashboards, tech refresh, revision of Colorado state standards, 3 major textbook adoptions, and implementing our long-range plan to renovate our existing schools and build 3 new schools. A number of years ago, under a previous superintendent, the district decided to undergo a comprehensive audit to drill down and find out why our district was not running as efficiently as it has in the past. One of the big findings was that we were involved in too many major projects, that there was too much on our plates, and it was taking its toll on the morale and productivity of our employees. I believe we are dangerously close to making the same mistake again. I would like to know exactly what is involved in making this new change. It seems rather simple, doesn't it? Change the bell schedules and add more buses, right? I imagine it is far more complicated than that, and I would like to understand the process before putting one more thing on the plates of the people who will be responsible for carrying out the will of the board. And finally, what about the silent majority out there who might be saying, what about the people in the trenches with the kids? With the resounding loss of Amendment 73, it's become abundantly clear that future funding for the salaries of teachers and the classified staff who work together every day is pretty grim. In addition, we desperately need to find funds to place additional mental health professionals in our schools to combat the ever-increasing rate of suicide. We can't count on the current shift in politics in Colorado to provide aid to this undeserved profession. Unless something dramatically changes, we will always have Tabor's big boot on our necks. Until we have a clearer picture of our financial situation in the coming year, I do not believe it's prudent to allocate several $1 million to this project at this time. I've heard over and over again, we need to do what's best for kids. I'll tell you what's best for kids. Healthy, happy educators who know they are appreciated and well compensated for the miracles they perform in their classrooms every day. I believe that we as a board need to send the message that everyone matters in the PSD community. So, final thoughts. Let's reflect on why we were elected to sit on the Board of Education. We were elected at large by our constituents to do what's best for PSD. That includes what's best for students, but it also includes everyone else. Our constituents expect us to take the 30,000-foot view and decide what's good for the district as a whole. We are the guardians of the welfare of our district, and we're expected to be responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollars they entrust to us. While I appreciate your passion and your sense of mission, I'm asking that we slow down this freight train. What's the rush? I'm asking that you, my colleagues, be willing to consider the wisdom of waiting a year to carefully plan before implementing Later Start. The successful businesses and corporations in our communities plan before they act. Just because we don't do it this coming year doesn't mean we're not going to do it. A lot of the difficult work is done already thanks to the diligent work of folks on the Later Start Committee. Personally, I support the research and the data. It's compelling. But at this point, the costs far outweigh the benefits. So let's be the board that's remembered for being thoughtful and mindful. Let's be the board that chooses to allow that extra time for thorough analysis before implementation. Let's anticipate problems and solve them before they happen. Let's be proactive rather than reactive. Let's make Later Start a successful change rather than hoping it will be. Let's take the time to do it right. I'll be giving these questions that I posed on this presentation to our staff so they'll have time to provide answers for us, and we'll receive our information by email, so you'll have time for review. I'm hoping that we can have a robust discussion when we meet again on December 11th. And again, I hope you will see the wisdom of postponing the implementation of Later Start. I'm sure you've all been bombarded by the same flurry of emails I have urging us to move forward now. But sometimes we have to do what we feel is best for the benefit of the whole community. I sincerely believe there are many different folks out there who are listening and will say, they actually heard me and considered my needs. Thanks for your indulgence.
Okay, and you've gotten some reactions. So I'll start with Nate and then Rob. So.
I think in life, timing is a very important aspect of how we conduct ourselves. And regardless of how the current motion is resolved, although I don't usually telecast my pitches, I will here. I would intend to move to amend the main motion to specify that the implementation date of any change to later school start times is the 2020-2021 school year. Because I don't think the community is ready for this next school year. I believe the longer-term public interest is for later school start times. But I think that our families, our students, our staff, our wider community, it's going to be a disruption regardless of when we do it. But I read all the information that I've received as telling me that there is a large group of people that is simply not ready for it at this time. And I think that it's important to give us the benefit of time to consider how we implement it and learn lessons from those who have decided to implement it. And I think that's the responsible thing to do. There are going to be costs and disruptions whenever it's implemented, if it's implemented. And I agree with Susan that compensation for our staff is a major issue, and I don't think that's going to get better. And this is going to have additional cost to implement this. But I think the disruptions to our community are so significant that I don't think it's the responsible thing to do to implement this in the next school year. And so I will vote to delay consideration of this action item to the December 11th meeting, but I'm most interested if we go ahead with it either tonight or December 11th, that the implementation be delayed until no earlier than the 2020-21 school year.
So to be clear, you've not made a motion yet. Okay, Rob.
I guess I'm confused about what we're talking about. There are at least 3 separate things that have been brought up here. I thought that the motion on the sort of most recent motion on the table was whether to delay the vote until the 11th. Most of what Director Gutowski's statement basically talked about will not be resolved between now and December 11th. So I'm confused by that to start with. Secondarily, Nate has brought up the possibility of, hey, this is a good idea, but maybe implemented later. So I don't know what to respond to, frankly. I could make a general pitch for why I think this is an important thing to do, but honestly, I'm asking for some procedural guidance here. What are we doing?
Okay.
Are we?
Okay, and I'll turn this over to you, Susan. You want to?
Okay, yeah, I can easily clarify that. My position is that I want to delay the vote because I don't have adequate information to even vote to whether I feel it's a good idea, and to be honest. So I have gaps in the information that I have, and I need to hear more. That's why I'm posing the questions and asking for responses that we all can read. My hope is that my presentation plus the information that we get will then be considered by the board, given 2 more weeks to think about what we're doing, and perhaps to vote to delay 1 year. And that is my proposal. I don't feel that we're ready at this point to launch into this later start. So I hope that clarifies it.
Well,
Hold on. I'll go to Rob and then Carolyn.
yeah, I'll just say that I am clear that we have enough we have as much information now as we're going to have 2 weeks from now to vote on this, whether it's the proposal that you and Nate seem to favor in terms of perhaps delaying it a year or not, or just keeping the start times the same. The questions that you raised in your statement, Susan, are so broad and so unknowable. We're not going to get another 50% of our public, if you want to look at it the way, stakeholders, to comment in some way on whether they think this is a good idea or not in the next 2 weeks. It's not going to happen. There's no way to make it happen, even if we were interested in, even if we thought that was the right approach, right? We're not going to know the answers to the questions you're talking about. So I am not going to vote in favor of delaying the consideration of this, and I will withhold further comment on what I think the merits are until after we vote on the current motion on the table.
Carolyn.
And I'd kind of like to make a point of order. We have 2 motions on the table. One motion from Kathy to vote on the modified B for later school start times, and we have a motion from Susan to delay the vote. And so Susan's, it's my understanding we'll be voting on Susan's motion first, and that is simply a vote to delay until the next meeting. And so while Susan has said that there's other things she wants us to consider, her motion does state to just delay the vote, and that's what we'll be voting on for hers. And that's my understanding, and that's how I'm voting on it, is as a delay.
Right.
Okay.
I understand that as well. Kathy?
No, I appreciate your comments, Susan. I believe, the silent majority, as you call them, honestly, if people care, they've taken the time to comment. If people don't care and didn't bother to comment, at some point, it's not my problem. If people refuse to stand up and be counted, it's just like in an election. They don't get their voices heard. I think what I'm hearing is a fear of change. We've had 2/3 of our survey respondents say that they want to have some kind of change. No, they didn't agree all at once on what kind of change, but they all have said later school start times for our secondary students is a good idea. And so I think it's important. I think we've done what the research says. The research says you spend a year having a conversation about this with your community before implementing it. We've done that. While you might have only seen the data from 2 districts in Colorado, there's 46 states that have school districts that have implemented these types of changes and have done so successfully. You can easily find those with a Google search. There are case studies, there are success stories, there are so many positive benefits from this, even if you just listen to the research. Personally, I am not willing to wait and continue to risk the health, mental and physical, of our students in Poudre School District because we are afraid to move forward and make change. The costs that you discussed. Okay, let's look at those costs real quick. The current cost, remember the current plan also had costs associated with it. The difference between the current plan and modified B is upfront $275,000. Ongoing cost, $75,000. Okay, if we merely make an improvement in the mental health of our students in our school district, that to me, more than covers the cost of this program, because it is so important to our students to have adequate sleep. Sleep deprivation is a war crime. People do that to punish people, to cause them extreme grief, and this is what we're doing to our students. I'm not saying we're instituting a war crime. I think the decision about field lights and et cetera can be determined later. We don't have to figure out everything right this minute. We need to decide whether or not we're going to move forward in a timely manner. I would say if you don't like the motion, you're certainly welcome to vote no on it, but let's get a read from the board and figure out where we are. I, too, will vote no on the motion to delay the vote. Thank you.
Nate?
I would say the words matter, and things like saying, it's not my problem, and I'm not willing to wait because we are afraid, and sleep deprivation is a war crime, are irresponsible things to say as an elected official in a public meeting. I realize there are substantive reasons to do this or not do this, and I just think that it's important to be careful about how we articulate the reasons why we are making a decision.
Okay, and if I may, Susan, would you be able to clarify and articulate just a small handful of the questions you're going to ask? I realize you had them in your language, but I have to admit, I'm not sure which way you're going to ask questions and what kind of information you're going to request over the next 2 weeks.
I just am proposing the questions that I presented in my information to the board because they're questions that would help me. It may be a mood issue. It may be that we obviously, not we, but there are certain members of the board whose minds are made up and are forging ahead with it and probably don't need the information that I do. Personally, I'm not prepared to vote tonight to move forward with this, with later start next year. And I will, if I don't get further information that I need, I will need to vote against implementation next year because I fully believe that it's a wonderful thing to do. I don't think that sleep deprivation is a war crime. I think that giving kids their sleep is a good thing to do, and I wholeheartedly support that. My issue is that now is not the time to do that. And I do believe that we need more time to plan. I have to clarify one thing, and I don't know that it has to do with the question that you asked, but I'm fearful of a board that says, well, we'll figure it out. Well, we'll just kind of go at it as it comes. Well, that's what Loveland is doing, and I would venture to say that they have some concerns. And so you have to plan, and that's my thought. And so I just can't support it. Not because of what it is, but because of the timing.
Carolyn?
And so I also had written notes down, Kathy, like I had questions like you did about the silent majority. Since the silent majority hasn't spoke, I would say we don't know who the silent majority is. And I think we have to be very careful about saying that there's a silent majority out there that isn't speaking, because that is something that is easy to say and hard to prove. And I think Kathy's right. If people didn't take the opportunity to fill out the anonymous survey, then what would 2 more weeks change if they wouldn't even fill out an anonymous survey that was given several times? And if they didn't involve themselves in any of the discussions during that time because they felt like it was better to stay quiet, I'm not sure why it was safer to remain silent. I think that the board has been very open to the community and to community comments. I think we've gotten a lot of letters both for and against, and that people have had a lot of opportunities to let the board know how they feel. As far as delaying the vote for 2 weeks because you have questions, I too think I'm not understanding from what you read what your questions were. I heard a lot of speculation about things that I don't think can be measured. And so I'm not exactly sure about what information I would get that would significantly change my mind between now and 2 weeks.
Okay, I'll allow Susan to respond to the direct questions, and I'll push it on. So,
It seems like you're focusing on the idea of the percentage that responded. That's not the urgency that I feel. I mentioned major projects that our district is undergoing right now. I mentioned the amount of work that it already entails for our staff, and that I feel that this is just one more thing that we're adding on to an already very full plate. That's one of the things. I also mentioned that we have teachers and educators who view, I suspect, and it's speculation, I can't prove it, but I feel it, probably because I was a teacher for 34 years, that putting this amount of money toward a project when there are other needs that we can address ourselves to, and you mentioned mental illness, Kathy, and I would say putting additional mental illness specialists into our schools would be a wise thing to do this year, and then postpone the later start until next year. I hope I'm articulating what I hope to.
all right, I'll go with Kristen and then Rob.
Okay. So, Susan, I really do appreciate your wanting to, slow down and take your time. And I like you, when I make decisions, I want to know everything. But what I'm hearing is that you're concerned about the number of big projects that we're doing, and that's not going to change in 2 weeks, nor is it going to change in the next 2 years. So I'm curious about why the delay of 2 weeks, because I just don't see how that will, what answers you're going to get over the next 2 weeks that will change, that will affect that decision-making process. And then, and this goes to all staff too, that I understand you know, y'all have been doing such great work and doing so much of it, so many big projects. That one more thing on your plate is just one more big thing on your plate. And yet I look down the line and I say, okay, if we do it next year, that's when we'll be working with the architects and, you know, designing these new buildings and building them. And then the year after that, we're going to be staffing them and funding them and opening them. And so I to myself, I said, well, when is a good year? I kind of liking it to a young family saying, well, when can we have kids? Only when we have this amount of money and we have this much stability. And guess what? You never reach that. You just, you know, you do it because it's right. And so that's what I'm feeling, and that's what what I'm not hearing is the specific questions that could be answered over the next 2 weeks that may change your mind or may change other board members. So with that, I don't see that I can delay the vote.
2 weeks to consider what I've presented and with additional information that you may not have considered. That's it. And then a vote.
Rob?
So I guess I want to say three things. One of them is that when we get to the part around whether we should implement a change or not, I have several things that I want to talk about, both in response to what Susan said and more generally. I also want us to be careful that while there are definitely concerns, stylistic concerns, in terms of how different people approach what they're trying to advocate for or what they're trying to advocate against. Let's not. That's been brought up, acknowledged. Let's not spend a lot of time trying to refer back to that as a point in the discussion, because that's not really what we're talking about. Really what we're talking about is the substance. At the first order here, what we're talking about is whether we're going to delay the vote or not. And on that point, I would like to call the question.
Okay, I would like to just make one comment. I've been trying to hear the questions, and I think what I hear is it boils down to one big question, which comes down to, is there a better time to implement this change? Is that the question you're asking? So give staff 2 weeks to address the question of whether timing matters for when we implement this change. I just want to be clear. Is that kind of what you're asking for? Okay. So I guess there was a call, so that requires a vote on the call, or can I just proceed to a vote?
It does require a vote on it, but in order to pass, it requires a 2/3 vote of the board to call the
Okay.
question.
Just to call the question.
Oh, just to call the question. Okay. End debate. All right.
So the
Can we just
question is, do we
proceed
need
to a
to
vote
on
on the
it?
motion at this point? No. Okay. All right. Well, there's a vote on the floor on whether to call this debate. I'll take a roll call on that, please.
And I say specifically on the question of whether we're going to delay this for a vote for 2 weeks, not on the broader, not on
Indeed,
Kathy's motion.
correct.
Okay,
Understood.
I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that we all know what we're voting on.
Roll call.
Yes on ending debate on the specific question.
Kristen,
Aye.
Christoph,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Carolyn,
Aye.
Kathy, 7-0.
Excellent. With that, I'll take a roll call on the motion, and that would be the motion to delay the vote on Kathy's original motion by 2 weeks to December 11th.
Yes.
Kristen,
No.
Christoph,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Kathy,
No.
Rob,
No.
Carolyn.
Is it 3-3?
You
Guess
finally
what?
get to break the
Guess
tie.
what?
Yeah, go for it.
That time has come.
Go for it.
I actually lost, so no is to.
No,
Hold on, okay, so,
no means
No.
not to prolong it.
No, no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, no.
Yeah. No means to kill
No,
it.
kill it,
Yeah, like that.
sorry.
okay, so to be clear, now the motion that Kathy originally made in favor of option B, the modified option B, is now on the floor, and the motion to delay by 2 weeks was defeated. So I will take any discussion on Kathy's motion. Somebody wants to make a motion? Nate?
So
Motion.
that we don't lose the opportunity, because my sense is if we vote on Kathy's motion, which didn't specify anything about an implementation date, it just said adopt modified option B going forward, I move to amend the main motion to specify that the implementation date of any change to later school start times in the Poudre School District is the 2020 to 2021 school year.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to amend the original motion and add a date of implementation that would be for the years 2020 to 2021. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Second, Susan. Any discussion on this?
Yeah, in a minute, but I have a procedural question. If someone, like me, for example, wanted to amend it in a different way, we have to go through Nate's amendment first, is that correct? Or how does the procedure work, Tom?
If you want to amend, and I understand this may not be what you're saying, but just to try and be clear, if you want to amend the timing of it, you would need to do it now. But if it's an amendment that's not related to Nate's proposed amendment, then we need to deal with this one first, and then it's a subsequent different amendment would be dealt with after this one's voted on.
So if I wanted to amend it to say that it was going to happen next year, that would be an amendment to Nate's amendment and stacked in? How would it work?
No, I think that that's when you want to wait.
Fine,
He's
got it.
saying
Okay, I'm just
one
asking.
thing, you
Okay.
would propose something else.
Okay,
like-
fine.
Okay, any discussion on Nate's Nate?
Well, that's fine. I'm concerned that if, now that Rob said he's going to do it, I appreciate that because the main motion doesn't
It
specify
doesn't. Yes.
anything other than going forward. So that's all I wanted to add.
Any other comments on that one? Yes.
Yeah,
Rob?
so I heard what you said, Nate, about the community not being ready for it. And there are certainly members of the community, perhaps even a significant number of them, who are very concerned about this going forward. I get that. And there are a lot of legitimate concerns. And when we get past this question of when we might implement this, if we're going to implement anything at all, I have some thoughts about some of those concerns as well. But as it relates to delaying it a year, I don't see that any of that is going to change in a year. The kinds of concerns that I heard were concerns of were concerns that about how it was going to affect people's lives. To a large degree. And when I say people's lives, a lot of it was about students and athletics and extracurricular activities and the like, and some of it was about staff, and some of it was about family life. And I don't think that anything about that is going to change much by delaying it a year. I don't think that there will be more answers for those folks that will satisfy those concerns over the next year. I think there's call it I think there is a fear of change, a fear of the unknown. As I mentioned last meeting, I think that happened also with the middle school change when we did that. And I think people are going to need to see it in action in order to be able to alleviate those fears. And I don't think, I mean, the fundamental reason from my point of view that we're considering this is because it is biologically and medically the right thing to do for our student population. And that there's no reason to believe that research is going to change in the next year. There's also no particular reason that I can see that people who are concerned about how athletics are going to change or how extracurriculars are going to change or et cetera, are going to somehow be persuaded in the next year that the value or the opportunity associated to get more sleep outweighs their concerns or their fear of the unknown or whatever, because one is a sort of a learning from a general research and science, and the other is I know how this works now, and I don't want it to change. I don't know how it's going to change. I don't know what that's going to do for me, and I get that. That's a real thing for people. So I don't see that any of that is particularly going to change in the next year. Now, you might say, and I think Susan alluded to this in her statement, that we could do some more planning, and that might help alleviate some concerns. I guess the thing I feel about that is that we have asked our staff to do beaucoup analysis already, and what I've heard from them is that to take the next step, which, by the way, will not only involve the people in this room and their direct staffs in central staff, but will involve the staff in every school in this district to resolve some of the questions that people are concerned about, like what is athletics going to look at Poudre High School next year, would require the staff of Poudre High School, in addition to the staff here and the athletic director of the district, and to figure out all those plans and put them all on the table in advance. And then, oh, by the way, there's some possibility that when we see the result, or when the public sees the result, they're not going to like it for some reason. Therefore, I don't think we can ask them to do that. I think we need to have the courage of our convictions and take the leadership, frankly, based on what we always say we try to do, which is based on educational research, and say this is the right thing to do, and then ask our educators and our staff and everything else to put everything in place. And I have a lot of confidence that they will do the very best job that they can at all levels, from here through the schools, through the teachers, to ensure that the broad range of opportunities that we have available for our students now will continue to be available. There will be changes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everything is going to be the same as it is now, because that's not going to be true. That's just not true. That's not a true statement. But that doesn't mean that people who are involved in athletics can't continue to be involved in athletics. As a generalization, you know, there may be some kid who can't, and there may be other kids who aren't now able to be involved in athletics who can be involved in athletics, or pick your favorite extracurricular activities, because we might have to do some schedule changes around that. So some of that is sort of the more general question about whether we should do this at all, and I have some more thoughts on that generally. But I think really the question of delaying it doesn't change the fundamentals about whether it's the right thing to do, and it leaves the question overhanging the district for no particular benefit, and potentially a lot of work for the staff when they're not 100% sure that anything's going to happen down the road. And I acknowledge again what Kristen said, which is the business about how many projects we have ain't going to be any different 2 years or a year from now. We're still going to be building schools. We're still going to be involved in achievement gaps. We're still going to be involved in, I don't know, pick your favorite projects. I'm not sure which one's going to end, frankly, in the next year. So sorry about the long-windedness, but I don't think we should no, I'm not, because I think we need to deal with Nate's motion first. So as you can tell from my comments here, I'm planning to vote against delaying the implementation of this for a year.
Okay. Other comments on that? And go ahead, Susan.
I'm sorry, but I don't believe that it's fear of change that keeps people from responding to surveys.
I did not say that,
was my
Susan.
understanding. Would
Well,
would you clarify for me what you
Well,
did
I'm
say?
not going to have words put in my mouth, Christoph.
No, please.
What I
What
said
did you say?
it is partially fear of change, which causes people to oppose initiatives like this because they understand how their world works now, and they don't have a full and clear understanding of how it's going to work in the new world, and so they say, "Hey, I don't know that. I don't want to deal with it." And I don't know how that may be a bad thing for me, and they don't necessarily internalize the good or the potential benefits because those are more, as I said, I'm trying to think of good wording for it, but those are more research based and less about my individual situation. So it has nothing to do with the survey particularly.
Okay. Nate?
Rob, I very much appreciate your comments and thank you for them, and I appreciate everyone else's comments. And I realize the staff has done a tremendous amount of work, and I want to thank them, and especially Bruce, the router. That guy is gold. So hopefully he'll still be around in a year or two. The reason I brought this is I think some benefit can be derived from allowing everyone more time in preparing for the change. I agree that there's fear of change and that drives some people in their decision making. And I agree there are going to be disruptions, whether it's implemented next school year or the following school year. And there are going to be disruptions in the 2021 and 2022 years when we open up those new schools. And I agree that, that there are a few easy decisions. That's why we signed up for this gig. And exercising leadership is about trying, in my mind, is about trying to determine what's in the public interest and make decisions on that basis. And that's why I said I believe this is in the longer term public interest to change to later school start times. And I think it's in the public interest to allow a year for people to prepare for change. But I realize that there's an equal view that maybe that's a negative because some people think there's limbo involved, and maybe that's not as makes it less valuable. I don't happen to agree with that, but I realize that that's an issue, and that's why I made the motion, because I think that some caution is appropriate, and regardless of when it's implemented, I agree with you, Rob, wholeheartedly that at some point you have to go through the change in order to adjust to the change. I just think there's some value in allowing people to prepare for the change.
All right.
Yeah, I'll just add just a quick comment. So thanks very much. I appreciate that thoughtful response, Nate. I really appreciate it, and I understand where you're coming from. I guess my view is that one of the reasons we've been asked to vote on this in November or December, and not any later in January was the original deal, right? Was to allow the staff and the public time to adjust to what's going on, and that gives 8 months before the beginning of the next school year. So I think I think the adjustments are going to happen then, or they're going to be delayed until the following year, and the additional benefit is not clear to me, as I indicated earlier. Thank you.
Carolyn?
I think I'd like to draw our focus back to something Kathy said a minute ago about the mental health of our students and being at the forefront of a part of this change. It's one of the considerations. And I got a letter here from a parent who's a mental health counselor who has 2 students in Thompson School District. And she wrote a letter to us, and she says, "We've had the chance this year to experience a late start firsthand. It was an adjustment for about a month for us, and then it became natural. The kids have not complained once since they have actually been grateful to feel so much better. My husband and I have noticed they are more excited for sleep and get to bed on time more frequently as well, which is a huge plus. We moved here from Cherry Creek School District, and they all also have implemented late start, and we heard great things from our friends, which put our minds at ease before we started it. Thankfully, we have been able to adjust our work schedules around this as well, because sleep is just too important for our overall health and well-being. Depression and suicide has become an epidemic now, and we need to do all that we can to combat this life-threatening issue. And I think that a lot of this research that we looked at talks about later start times, helping out with kids' mental health issues. And I think if once again, if we look at what's good for kids, I think that these later start times and the additional sleep does help kids' mental health issues. And so I'm in favor of starting this next year.
Okay. And as for me, I did actually find the questions about timing compelling, but given that we're not going to give those 2 weeks for that, I'm going to vote against the 2021, and I don't have the information that says that would be better. So short of any other comments, I'll ask for a roll call on the motion, which was to amend the original motion to add a start or an implementation date of 2020 to 2021 school year. It's caught on camera and recording, so.
Yes.
Kristen,
No.
Christoph,
No.
Susan,
Aye.
Kathy,
No.
Rob,
No.
Carolyn.
No.
Motion fails 3-5.
Okay, we could add a motion to add a date, or we can assume that the entire investigation assumed, and I think it said it throughout, that the start date was 2019 school year.
I think given.
Or would you like to add
Yeah, I'd
a
like
motion?
to.
Okay.
I'd like to move.
Rob.
I'd like to amend the motion to say that the proposed modified B schedule will be implemented next year. That is next school year. Sorry, not next calendar year.
And
January, come on.
I would be happy to second on the
Okay,
point.
second from Kathy.
That it's,
Do we have
always
any
good to be
discussion
clear.
on that motion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call, please. The motion is to amend the original motion to specify that the implementation date would be next school year, starting in 2019, fall, modified. Okay, a question.
So after we vote on this is just a vote on the amendment, so Rob will have a chance to make his comments on the substance of the issue, right?
He will indeed.
Okay.
Roll call.
So, Christoph, I have a, I
All right,
have one question.
hold
So
on.
just clarification. So all we're doing is the semantics. We're just voting on how
You're
it will
purely
be worded.
voting on the
not
amendment.
that we agree.
Not that you agree.
Okay.
That's correct.
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Christoph,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Kathy,
aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, the school board is back in form. Nicely done. Okay. I would take discussion on the motion. Do I need to repeat the motion, or does everybody understand where we are? Okay. Any discussion, comments?
I plan to vote aye, at least for purposes of reconsideration, because it's my understanding that Robert's Rules requires you to be on the prevailing side in order to bring a motion for reconsideration. So, but generally, I think the longer-term public interest is served by modified option B, since we probably are going to vote to go to later school start times.
Rob. Yeah, I've said some of the general comments that I intended to make in the earlier comments, so I'll try not to repeat myself. I'll just say a couple of things that strike me in addition. One of them is that there was some concern that we're not taking into account the voices of educators. Again, I think two things about that. One of them is we've certainly reached out to educators through internal communications and by ensuring that the survey was available to them. So I think there's been opportunity, and we've certainly heard from some educators, some positive and some negative. Some stood up in front of made community comment with their expressing their opposition. So at some point, again, we've heard from some. Again, it's anecdotal evidence, not any kind of a conclusive thing. But my informal conversations with board members in Loveland and Cherry Creek seem to indicate that the educators are generally in favor of what has changed in those districts. It's not exactly what we're planning to do, or has been proposed that we do. Sorry. And it's, as I say, it's anecdotal evidence. So I think there's some basis to say that educators have had an opportunity. And frankly, now that I think about it, I believe our PEA president made a special request three times to the PEA membership to send their comments to the board, and we got what we got. So I'm not sure what else we can do besides reach out and allow the opportunity. The discussion of mental health and the possibility of allocating these funds to, or some of these funds that we might otherwise spend on buses, incremental bus costs, or lights or other things that might be associated with this. I think there's, obviously I've been in favor of in enhancing our mental health capabilities, and we fortunately had the opportunity this past year through some of the mill levy money to do that, and I think that's terrific. I look, in addition, though, to the fact that this measure or this change, once it's implemented, is likely to be a proactive measure in improving the mental health of our students as opposed to a reactive measure. Now, that's a little unfair because, of course, the mental health professionals in our schools also try to be proactive in working with their students and whatnot. But there's also a reactive element in terms of what we're presented with, if you will, in our schools with the needs that the students have. And I think this is an opportunity, the later start time, based on research and evidence from school districts that have implemented this. That this is a proactive step for mental health, and I certainly applaud it in that vein. The question of costs, people have mentioned the whole question of the cost of the lights. I don't, as Kathy said, I don't. Let me put it this way: I'm not voting for $4 million in lights by voting for this tonight. I don't think that's necessarily a corollary, if you will, direct corollary from this. What I'll be looking for, and I think this is support, if I'm not too much putting words in your mouth, Scott, what I think I heard Scott say is that if we just kept things the way they are, we'd put $4 million to this and we'd have lights, and it doesn't solve all the problems about neighborhoods and all that, but just in terms of lighting the fields, right? But that we might, and we will, in fact, partly because we'd be forced to from a timing point of view, but also partly because it's the right thing to do, be working with the coaches in the schools and the when I say we, I mean the administration, obviously not the board, working with the coaches in the schools and the athletes to perhaps change some of the parameters around when and how we do athletics, which might affect the total bill. I'm not saying the bill is going to be zero, but I would certainly want to see the best efforts of our staff in terms of optimizing the use of the fields with minimizing the costs. And I expect the bill would be less than $4 million as a result, based on everything I've heard. I don't know. I think really I'll just mostly leave it there. I think there's a lot of promise to this, to going ahead with this. I think this provides an opportunity. I think this does what we need to do in the sense of providing the best within this sphere of stuff, the best opportunity for our students to learn, right? Will every student get the full benefit of this? Probably not, right? But I believe that it's our job to provide that opportunity, and I believe that the vast majority of students will have the opportunity, will be able to take advantage of some or all of the opportunity for additional sleep. And I believe, based on research and the experience of other school districts, that provides mental and physical health benefits for the students, likely a better opportunity for learning, and therefore I think it's the right thing to do.
Does that mean you're going to vote for it? All right.
I'm still thinking about it.
Very well said, well spoken. On the lights thing, like the transportation costs and other costs, there are going to be costs, and when we make the decision, we have to figure out how to pay for it, and there'll be trade-offs. But I just want to put in a plug that the lighting costs are over a period of years, and they're capital costs. They're also operating costs of lights. But I just want to say that I believe athletics is an important co-curricular, extracurricular activity, and it has multiple benefits. And so the comment about $100 an hour to run a field of lights is about the same as it costs to hire a bus driver to take the teams down to each event, to each competition. So I'm not as concerned about the total costs, because our decision will have costs. So I just wanted to put in a plug for athletics as being something that's positive and not a negative.
Yeah, I just need to respond to that. I absolutely believe that athletics is an important part of the offerings that we have, and we should, as I said earlier, I think, to ensure as best as possible that we continue to have the wide range of offerings that we have now, both in athletics and in other kinds of extracurriculars. My comments about the lights were simply a matter of what's the best use of funding and how can we optimize our use of funding while still maintaining a range of the full range of opportunities.
Okay, and then Kathy?
I just want to say I kind of think I see the same proportion of people on the board supporting this as in the public that supports later school start time. I don't think it's a bad thing to have people vote against or for. I think everybody here is doing what's in the best interest of the students in the best of their ability, and it is my belief that this change is for the best for our students, and I will be supporting this motion.
Kristen?
All right. So if y'all don't mind, I actually have a prepared statement that I was going to read, if that's okay for you.
Please.
All right. So. Reset? Oh no, there you go. What do I get, 3 minutes? Is that it? Over the past few months, we've heard from teachers, students, community members, and parents concerning a later start time for Poudre School District's middle and high schools. I want to thank each and every one of you who took the time to come to a community engagement session, write an email, share a Facebook post, and or speak to me about your concerns, thoughts, and ideas. Your input has resulted in the third option, known as the modified B option. So that's, when we were talking about the input from, from everybody, that actually, the community's input, students, staff, community members, they all, the ones who, were saying, can we have the later start but the earlier end time? And thanks to you guys, you made that happen. So from the input from the community and then your hard work, y'all made that happen, so thank you. This modified B option hits the goal recommended by the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Hanover Research Council of starting high schools after 8:30 a.m. while keeping the high school end times no later than 4:05, a concern we heard from students and parents alike. Although middle schools will not quite hit the 8:30 a.m. mark, an 8:05 start is still 30 minutes later than the current time. Later start for middle school and high schools creates additional costs beyond the current busing schedule, approximately $275,000 as a one-time startup cost and approximately $75,000 ongoing yearly cost with 2 additional drivers. Although this is significant, I believe it will be money well spent for our students and staff. The Hanover Research Council found that school districts could increase student safety and boost adolescent academic success by instituting later start times for middle and high school students. Studies have cited benefits ranging from mood and alertness to fewer automobile accidents and less engagement and high-risk behavior among middle and high school students who get more sleep. Researchers have shown that even a modest delay in school start time, 30 minutes, produces improvements in measures of student mood, alertness, and health in adolescent students. The American Academy of Pediatrics found, quote, a substantial body of research has now demonstrated that delaying school start times is an effective countermeasure to chronic sleep loss and has a wide range of potential benefits to students with regard to physical and mental health, safety, and academic achievement. The American Academy of Pediatrics strongly supports the efforts of school districts to optimize sleep in students and urges high schools and middle schools to aim for start times that allow students the opportunity to achieve optimal levels of sleep and to improve physical, example, reduced obesity risk, and mental, example, lower rates of depression, health, safety, example, drowsy driving crashes, academic performance, and quality of life, end quote. With this in mind, I will vote for the modified B later start scenario to start in fall of 2019. Although this will be a quick turnaround, I know the PSD staff and administration have been working diligently on everything from bus routes to communication to the public and will make the necessary adjustments as required. We cannot delay the health impacts this may have for our students. As AMA board member William E. Kobler said, scientific evidence strongly suggests that allowing adolescents more time for sleep at the appropriate hours results in improvements in health, academic performance, behavior, and general well-being. We believe delaying school start times will help ensure middle and high school students get enough sleep and that it will improve the overall mental and physical health of our nation's young people. Did I make it? 3:35. Oh, so close.
Excellent. All right, anybody else comments? Susan?
When the vote comes, I have to clarify that I wholeheartedly support everything that you've said, Kristen. I understand the research, I understand the benefits, and I do support that wholeheartedly. I just have to reiterate that I believe that the timing is not right, but I also believe, and I think we as a board have agreed over and over, that when we see the majority of our colleagues supporting a measure, an issue, whatever it is that we've faced, that we fall in line and support the majority of our board members, and I plan to do that. I plan to support the later start times, 2019.
Okay, and as for me, I think probably the biggest question, well, first of all, this board over the course of the year and the staff did influence me. I mean, I did start really questioning whether this was the right thing to do, and I will say the only remaining question I have has to do with the elementary school start times. I am, if it were up to me, I would have made the motion for scenario A, because I do somewhat question this idea of sending half of our elementary school students to school at 7:45 in the morning, and I feel like maybe the middle schoolers might have been able to handle that a little better just before they get to that key adolescent age. So that would have been my choice. But other than that, I think this board and the staff have done a nice job of doing the work behind this, doing the outreach, digging for public comments as much as we possibly can, altering scenarios as needed, and I'm going to also vote in favor of the change to scenario B, modified. All right. Any other questions, comments before we ask for roll call? Seeing none, I will ask for roll call, please.
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Christoph,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Very good. Board, well done. A lot of excellent discussion tonight. Way to go. And with that, Rob, you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
have a question for Nate. You had mentioned being on the winning, for lack of a better word, there's probably a better word, prevailing side, being necessary for a motion for reconsideration. Did you want to elaborate at all on what you had in mind?
If I felt it was appropriate, and I don't think it's appropriate, I could bring it up at a later time to reconsider this vote, but I don't
Okay.
see that there's any need to do that.
All
So,
right. Thank you for the clarification.
Carolyn.
And then I would just like a clarification from Tom. A motion to reconsider is usually taken up at this meeting or the next meeting, is that correct?
This meeting or the next day, so it's really something that needs to be done at this meeting,
Mm-hmm.
if at all. And it is correct that you have to vote for the matter that passed in order to be able to raise it. So it's usually to argue for reassertion of a amendment that failed or something, that it would come up. Now, it can, more information than you want, but what was the action taken tonight could, if the board voted to do it, could effectively be changed at any future meeting just by bringing a new thing and saying we want to go in a different direction. So that is technically not a motion to reconsider, but it has the same effect. Technically, I think you're right. If we're going to do a motion to reconsider, it would have to be done tonight.
Excellent.
So,
Add that to the agenda next week. So, Rob.
so I understand there are differences of opinion here, both in terms of timing and perhaps whether we should do it at all. But I think it's only fair to our staff if we're going to ask them to undertake the, as Susan correctly pointed out, the tremendous amount of work that's going to be involved in making this happen, that we're that we are clear based on the information that we have now that we're not going to try to reconsider this next month or the month after or whatever. I mean, obviously circumstances could change, I mean, God knows what could happen. But
Rob, I'm not sure you're in a position to make a motion of that type.
I'm not making a motion.
Okay.
I'm not making a motion,
Okay.
but I'm trying to be fair to the staff, right? I mean, if we leave them with the impression that 3 months from now we might have another vote on this and it might go the other way, that's not fair. And maybe I'm taking this too far, and if so, I apologize.
Nate?
I guess we have to depend on our chair to make sure he has a backbone that he won't allow it to be put on the agenda.
I told you, I was adding it to the agenda. 2 weeks, so. Okay. This meeting is adjourned at 10:05.